Man, have you heard what just went down? Charlie Kirk, yeah, the guy who built Turning Point USA and turned college debates into national headlines, was shot right in the throat in front of a live audience. I know, it sounds unreal, but it happened, and the footage and eyewitness accounts are blowing up everywhere. This isn't just another news story. It's the kind of moment that flips everything upside down. A polarizing figure, a public attack, and now the entire country is asking who pulled the trigger and why. And here's the thing. Once you hear about Kirk's controversies, his critics, and what could happen to the shooter, you'll see why this story is bigger than one man. Stick around, because this is about to get heavy. Let's walk through exactly what happened, step by step. It was Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, around 12:10 p.m. local time. The scene? Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk had set up one of his trademark Prove Me Wrong tables as part of his American Comeback Tour. The event was meant to be a debate-style stop, drawing students, supporters, and plenty of critics ready to challenge him face-to-face. As Kirk was in mid-discussion, answering a question about gun violence and mass shooters, a sharp crack echoed across the campus. Witnesses described it as a single gunshot, fired from roughly 200 yards away, possibly from the rooftop of a nearby building. In that instant, panic spread. Reporters on site said they saw Kirk grab at his throat as blood poured down. One eyewitness told CBS there was just a lot of blood. People screamed. Everyone hit the ground. Others recall the confusion. Some thought it was a prank until they saw the chaos unfold. Security rushed Kirk away as the crowd scattered, students ducked behind tables, and university staff triggered an immediate evacuation. Sirens filled the air as police sealed off the campus, treating it as an active shooter situation. Within minutes, Kirk was rushed to the hospital. Early reports described him in critical condition, undergoing emergency surgery for the gunshot wound to his throat. But the updates that followed only deepened the shock. By evening, Trump announced on Truth Social that Kirk had died, calling him the great and even legendary Charlie Kirk. Law enforcement's response was swift, but also confusing. Initial reports said a person of interest had been taken into custody, but later officials clarified that the suspect may not have been the actual shooter. The FBI and ATF immediately joined the investigation, treating the incident as a potential political assassination. Utah's governor didn't mince words. He called it exactly that, promising the state would push for the harshest penalties possible once the perpetrator was found. The political world reacted just as quickly. Trump's announcement sparked a wave of responses from allies and rivals alike. Politicians across the spectrum condemned the attack, framing it as another disturbing sign of escalating political violence in America. California's governor called it an assault on democracy itself. Others warned that the attack could set a dangerous precedent for future political confrontation.
So before that single shot turned him into the center of a national tragedy, who exactly was Charlie Kirk, and why was he such a lightning rod? To understand the reaction to his death, we've got to rewind and look at the controversies that followed him everywhere. First, there's Turning Point USA, the organization he founded back in 2012 when he was barely out of high school. On paper, the mission was simple: promote free markets and conservative values on college campuses. And in fairness, TPUSA did explode into a national network, with chapters across universities and even massive conferences that drew political heavyweights like Donald Trump. But critics say the tactics were anything but simple. One former staffer told reporters it was less about ideas and more about headlines. We were told to go viral, whatever it took. Opponents accused TPUSA of making lists of liberal professors to intimidate faculty, while watchdog groups raised questions about whether its nonprofit status matched its political campaigning. To his fans, it was bold youth activism. To his critics, it was manipulation wrapped in student outreach. Then there were Kirk's statements on guns and mass shootings. He never shied away from controversy. In one debate, he said, "Every year there are some gun deaths. Tragic, yes, but that's the cost of freedom. Liberty isn't free."
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
For supporters, that was raw honesty. For critics, it was proof he valued ideology over lives. After Parkland and Uvalde, many activists called those words deeply irresponsible in a country already scarred by school shootings. His media presence fueled the fire even more. Kirk's daily podcast reached millions, but not without pushback. A 2021 Brookings Institution analysis found his show among the top spreaders of false or misleading claims in political podcasting. One researcher flat out said the data shows Kirk's podcast has one of the highest misinformation rates in the country. To his followers, that was just another example of mainstream institutions attacking a conservative voice. To his detractors, it was evidence that Kirk was feeding young audiences distortion, not debate. And then there was his style. If you've ever seen Charlie Kirk on stage, you know how he operated. Quick comebacks, sharp sound bites, always looking for the viral moment. He once told a crowd, "I'd rather offend you into the truth than comfort you with the lie." That swagger electrified his supporters, who loved the no-filter approach. But critics heard something else: provocation for its own sake, a deliberate strategy to inflame culture wars. One columnist put it bluntly, Kirk isn't debating, he's baiting.
Charlie? I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a capitalist, okay? I live what I believe. No. What do? I get charity every single year.
What does fetus mean?
A fetus is in utero.
What does fetus mean in Latin?
What the f? I'm sorry, is this a language class?
It means little human being.
Do you truly, in your heart of hearts, truly believe that this is a human being? This?
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt?
Yes.
This is a dolphin fetus.
So let me...
Without a doubt, a dolphin fetus is a human being.
That's how we get Auschwitz. That's how we get the greatest horrors of the 20th century. Those people are unwanted.
So you're comparing abortion to the Holocaust?
Absolutely, I am. In fact, it's worse. It's worse.
It's really not. I don't think
it's 45 million babies. It's nearly 8 times worse than the Holocaust. What's the moral difference between a small baby and the...
All of this, TPUSA's aggressive tactics, the unapologetic defense of gun rights, the misinformation flags, and the polarizing style made Charlie Kirk far more than a conservative commentator. He became a symbol, someone people either rallied behind or despised. Which leads us to the hard question. When the shot rang out in Utah, was it just the act of a lone extremist? Or was it the tragic climax of years of rhetoric, controversy, and polarization colliding in real life?
Now, let's zoom out, because this shooting isn't just about Charlie Kirk. It's part of a much darker pattern we've been seeing in America. Over the last decade, political violence has spiked in ways that would have been unthinkable not long ago. Think back. The 2011 shooting of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords in Arizona, the 2017 attack on Republican lawmakers at a baseball practice where Steve Scalise was nearly killed, the attempted kidnapping of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020, and more recently, the brutal hammer attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband inside their own home. Each case was different, but they all told the same story. America's political divide isn't just on Twitter, it's bleeding into the real world. Experts have been warning about this trend. A 2022 report from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace noted the United States is experiencing levels of political violence not seen in decades, driven by polarization, disinformation, and declining trust in institutions. In other words, it's not just isolated events, it's a climate. And that brings us back to Charlie Kirk. His rhetoric wasn't cautious, and it wasn't meant to be. Supporters loved him for being blunt. But critics argued that his style didn't just push boundaries, it escalated tensions. After the shooting, one political analyst told Axios, Kirk was both a victim and a contributor to the atmosphere that made political violence feel inevitable. That's a heavy statement, but it reflects how divided the reaction has been. Supporters flooded social media with tributes, calling him a martyr for free speech. One fan wrote on X, "They silenced Charlie because he spoke the truth." But his critics were just as loud. Some argued not to excuse the violence, but to point out the irony that a man who often amplified incendiary rhetoric had himself become a target of it. As one columnist in The Guardian put it, Kirk lived by the culture war, and tragically, he died in it. Even officials weighed in on the broader issue. Utah's governor called the shooting a political assassination and warned this is what happens when hate festers unchecked. Meanwhile, President Trump used it as a rallying cry, posting on Truth Social that Charlie Kirk was a great warrior for our cause taken from us by the forces that hate America. So here's the uncomfortable question we're left with. Did Charlie Kirk's fiery approach to politics simply make him a bigger target, or is he the latest casualty of a country that's tearing itself apart? Maybe it's both. And that's what makes this moment so unsettling. Not just what happened in Utah, but what it says about where America is heading. So let's talk about the shooter, or at least what we know so far. Right after the chaos at Utah Valley University, police moved fast. Reports first said a person of interest had been taken into custody. Students on campus even claimed they saw someone being led away in handcuffs. But just hours later, officials clarified that the individual may not have been the actual shooter. And that's where the mystery deepens. The FBI and ATF quickly joined the case, which tells us investigators aren't treating this as a random act. They're treating it like a possible act of domestic terrorism, even political assassination. Utah's governor didn't mince words either, saying, "We will pursue the harshest penalties available under the law, including the death penalty for whoever's responsible." That's a rare statement so early in an investigation, and it shows just how serious they believe this crime is. So what are the possibilities?
Scenario 1. A lone extremist. This is the most straightforward theory. Someone radicalized by online rhetoric who saw Kirk as a symbol and decided to make him a target. If that's true, investigators will dig into social media accounts, online forums, and chat logs to see if the shooter left behind posts, manifestos, or threats. One law enforcement analyst told PBS, "In cases like this, the trail is often digital. We'll know what they were reading, who they were following, and how long this plan was in motion." Scenario 2. A personal vendetta. Less likely, but possible. Could the shooter have had a personal grudge, maybe a former associate or even someone who felt wronged by Turning Point USA's campus campaigns? If so, the FBI will be combing through phone records, texts, and personal ties to see if there's any history between the suspect and Kirk. Scenario 3. A broader plot. This is the darkest option, that the shooter wasn't acting alone. Maybe they were encouraged, even supported by a small cell or extremist group. If investigators find coordination, this would escalate into one of the most serious domestic terrorism cases in years. For now, though, the public is left with questions. Was the person detained and released simply a bystander? Was the rooftop shooter prepared with an escape plan? Did they leave behind any trace, fingerprints, shell casings, a getaway vehicle? And most importantly, what was the motive? Until authorities release more, all we can do is wait. But here's the reality. Once they find the suspect, the charges will almost certainly include first-degree murder, with the possibility of capital punishment. And given the national spotlight, the trial, if it comes, will be one of the most watched in decades. So the manhunt is on. Federal agents are working around the clock, combing through every lead. But until they make that announcement, until someone is named, this case sits at the intersection of fear, politics, and unanswered questions. So where does all this leave us? Because this shooting isn't just about Charlie Kirk. It's about what comes next for America. First, let's talk about free speech and security. College campuses were already battlegrounds for political debate, and Kirk leaned right into that. He thrived on the tension. But now, every university, every conference organizer, every student group is asking the same question. Can we even host controversial figures safely anymore? Expect to see metal detectors at future events, heavy police presence, and even some schools canceling speakers altogether. That's a huge shift because it risks turning the so-called marketplace of ideas into a fortress where only the safest voices get heard. Second, the political fallout. For conservatives, Kirk's death could become a rallying cry. Already, figures like Trump have framed it as proof that conservative voices are under attack. Expect Turning Point USA to double down, using this tragedy to energize young activists. One TPUSA supporter wrote online, "Charlie didn't die in vain. He died fighting for us." On the flip side, critics argue the event proves just how combustible the rhetoric has become. Some commentators are warning, if this doesn't wake us up about the dangers of inflammatory speech, nothing will. So the divide won't shrink, it'll probably get even sharper. Third, the national conversation on political violence. This isn't the first time an American figure has been targeted, but it feels different. This was broad daylight, on a campus, in front of hundreds. It shattered the illusion that political violence is rare or distant.
Lawmakers will push new security measures, maybe even new laws targeting domestic extremism. But here's the problem. While politicians argue over solutions, ordinary people are left wondering if attending a rally or debate could put them in the crosshairs. And then there's Kirk's legacy. He was only 31 years old. Supporters will paint him as a martyr for free speech, someone who gave his life defending conservative values. His critics will say his polarizing style helped fuel the very atmosphere that took him down. Either way, his influence isn't ending here. If anything, it's about to be magnified. Because when a public figure is taken out violently, they stop being just a person, and they become a symbol. And symbols are far harder to silence. So what does this mean going forward? It means politics in America just crossed another line. More security, more polarization, more fear, and maybe, just maybe, a reckoning about how dangerous our rhetoric has become. But whether that reckoning brings people together or drives them even further apart, that's the question none of us can answer yet. So here we are. A single shot in Utah didn't just end an event. It ripped through the heart of America's political conversation. Charlie Kirk wasn't just another commentator. He was a symbol, a fighter, and for many a provocateur. His rise made him impossible to ignore, and his death has made him impossible to forget. The facts are still unfolding. Investigators are hunting for answers. The public is split between grief, outrage, and finger-pointing, and the rest of us are left staring at a question that's bigger than one man. How did political debate in this country get so dangerous that it now comes with the risk of blood on the stage? I don't have that answer, but I do know this. What happened to Charlie Kirk will be remembered as a turning point one way or another. Either it shocks us into pulling back from the edge, or it pushes us over it. What do you think? Was this an isolated act of hate, or was it a symptom of something much larger brewing in America? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your take. And if you want to dive deeper into how political violence is reshaping our country, check out my next video, where we break down the patterns nobody's talking about. Stay safe, stay alert, and let's hope we don't see another day like this again.